It's weird the things that you can remember when you were a kid. So in the first grade, I can remember my friend Eric. You got a good grade on a test, and you got to go to the prize chest. So in the classroom, there's that prize chest where there's all this stuff in there. Of course, it amounts to like $2 worth of merchandise total in this entire big thing. But he got a Transformer pencil out. And he was so excited about it. He was so proud of it, and he was never going to use it. In fact, what he did was he would take the Transformer pencil and he would set it in the front of his desk. You know, there's that little groove where your pencils would go, and it would just sit there like a trophy. And every once in a while, you'd be talking to him, and he looked like an old man or something. You'd start talking to him, he'd be like, I don't know about that. And he'd take his pencil, he'd just touch the corner of his mouth with it. Yes. Well, it's like, are you English now? Are you a professor? What are you doing? But he wanted to make sure everybody saw that Transformer pencil because he was so proud of it. Then one day, his pencil was missing. And we're trying to figure out where his pencil is. Well, another kid in the class named Brandon had taken the pencil, had sharpened the pencil down like halfway. Like those kids who just sit there and just sharpen. And you're like, it's done. Take a look at it. He had sharpened half the pencil down, and he was just using it. And Eric was so upset. And his solution to the situation was, I'm going to beat up Brandon. I was like, Eric, I don't think that's a good idea. Brandon was held back a year. He was a lot bigger than all of us. He was crazy. I was like, he's going to rip your arms off and just beat you with them. Let's not go fight Brandon. Brandon's a kid you don't want to fight. Eric was a kid who couldn't beat up anybody. This is a terrible scenario like that I see. So the solution, though, that the teacher came up with, Miss Russell, he had to give the pencil back, now that it's half used, and give a brand new pencil of his own as a way of making amends. The problem was this was just one of those ugly, yellow, plain, non-transformer pencils. So Eric was bothered by the whole thing. He was so upset. He was so mad. He felt powerless. He can't do anything. This is so unfair. A couple of weeks go by. We just kind of move on. Then one day, my friend Bryce brings in several individual packages of tissues. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle tissues, okay? And let me tell you, everybody had the sniffles that day because we all wanted a Ninja Turtle. And they were the exact same as any other tissue you would get, but it's like, oh, Bryce, can I have a tissue? And he'd hand you the pack. He'd be like, so who you want? He had 3 of them. I can't remember which turtle he was missing, but there were 3 different turtles. I'd be like, oh, I want the Leonardo. Here you go. So he handed me, and you just sit there and stare at the package. Wow. These are tissues with turtles on them. And it's like, when a kid gets a Christmas present, they play more with the box than they do the present. It was kind of like that. It's like, how are we so obsessed and so excited about these tissues? But we were. Well, later that day, we came back from recess. Tissues were gone. And it was like, oh my goodness, like we're falling apart as a class. We're all going to go up and go to prison or something. Like we got thieves all over. And so they did a search. They went through every kid's bag and desk, and then they found the tissues. You know who had them? Not Brandon. Plot twist. It was Eric. Eric, who had been hurt by somebody taking his stuff, he took all of Bryce's little packages of tissues, had them hidden under his desk, underneath some books. Well, then it was like, okay, you were caught stealing, and you got to make things right. And he's like, no, I'm sorry, and I didn't take any of the tissues in here. I'll give them back, see? It's just one thing. Like, I said I'm sorry. What else do you want me to do? And it's like, I don't know, go outside and fight, because that's what you were going to do to Brandon, like make this, And it ended up, he had to do like an in-school, like lunchtime detention, where he lost his recess. He had to eat lunch and then sit at the table while we all got to go outside and play. That was his punishment. He thought it was like the equivalent of the death penalty. And that just sent him like even to a further, he's like, so he ruined my pencil, and nothing happened to him, and all I did was take the tissue. I just wanted to look at him, and yeah. But there's a principle that was taught to me that like season of my life that I've seen remain true. When you do something wrong, you want grace. When someone else does something wrong, you want judgment. So when you do it wrong, it's like, I'm sorry, my bad. Let's just move on. No, we're going to talk about it. No, we don't need to talk about this. I said I'm sorry. Let's just move on. But when somebody does something to you, or you see someone do it, we have different phrases and expressions that we use. We say things like, hey, you made your bed. Now you got to lie in it. Or, hey, don't do the crime. You can't do the time. And we say those different things about other people, never about us. Eric's response to the lunchtime detention wasn't, you know what? Did the crime? I should have to do the time. I accept my punishment. No, he whined and he complained because it was him who stole. It was him who's going to be judged. And that doesn't just happen when you're 7 years old. It happens your entire life. When you do something wrong, you expect grace. I made a mistake. It was a moment of weakness. I'm a good person. I want forgiveness. And when someone else does something wrong, you expect for them to be judged. Now, as we continue our series in the Gospel of John today, we're going to be in John chapter 8, and what we see is this scenario. And there's a tension here when you start talking about judgment and you start talking about grace. Being held accountable for your mistakes and kind of, getting off or getting a second chance or whatever. There's a tension there, and you feel it as a parent, you may feel it as a boss, you feel it as a teacher, you feel it as a coach. Because there are times, and most of the time, I just want to give grace because it's easier. I just want to say, just don't do it again. And with your kids, it's like, I have a headache. I feel like I've been yelling at you guys all day. Could you just stop fighting, or could you stop doing whatever it is you're doing? And you just want to give grace because you don't want to deal with it. But if you don't deal with it, if you don't hold them accountable, if there's not some form of repercussion or judgment with disobedience, then it's just going to keep spiraling more and more out of control. And so as a boss, as a teacher, as a parent, as someone in authority, you're trying to toe that line of, I've got to hold people accountable, but at the same time, I also want to be as gracious as I possibly can. And in our story today, Jesus kind of helps to toe that balance. He manages that tension so well because we see a situation where someone deserved judgment, and he was able to give grace, but then also help them to see that they need to get back on the straight and narrow. Now this story, if you've opened your Bible to John chapter 8, at the very beginning, there may be a footnote, or there may be kind of an indication that the passage that we're going to cover isn't in the earliest manuscripts of John, which means the oldest copies that we have of the Gospel of John, this story is not present in this place. So people a lot smarter than me, the scholars, have written hundreds and thousands of pages trying to figure out where this story is supposed to be in kind of all four Gospels, but in John in particular. And then, is it actually true? Did it actually happen? And the solution they came to is it probably wasn't in John's Gospel in this place, but it does seem to be an authentic Jesus story. It's something that they believe actually happened, but that it was talked about longer than all the other stories, and it was written down later than all the other stories. And when you hear the story, you're going to be like, yeah, that sounds like Jesus. That seems like a Jesus move that we're going to see. And it's one of those lessons that we need to learn and apply correctly to our lives. So we're in John chapter 8, beginning with verse 2. Here's what it says. At dawn, he appeared again, Jesus, in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. Interesting to me, at dawn, he starts teaching people the Bible. They didn't have coffee back then. Imagine that if we had a sunrise service each and every week here at our church. It would be me and my parents. That would be the only group of people that would be here, and they would just be here to support me. So they're serious about learning and hearing, and they gathered around. Jesus sits down to teach them, because in their day, the teacher would sit down, the students would stand up. That wouldn't work here. You'd be like, hey, my knee's starting to hurt. Wrap this thing up. I ain't standing here for another 10 minutes while you kind of go around in circles. So Jesus is sitting. Everybody is standing. He's teaching them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in the woman caught in adultery. And so there's this big commotion where Jesus is teaching, and all of a sudden this woman just gets thrown out in front of all the crowd and all the people that are there. And they say to the woman, you guys stand up. This is a court. This is a trial. They made her stand up before the group, and they said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. This isn't hearsay. This isn't he said, she said. This is, we know for a fact she was committing adultery. She was caught in the act. Now, in the law of Moses, and this is true, you go through the Old Testament, in the law of Moses, he commanded us to stone such a woman. Now, what do you say? What should we do? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis of accusing him. Because here's the tension that's at play. And this is what they know to be true. They've been plotting and trying to figure out a way to get rid of Jesus. And they've been unsuccessful. If you've been reading through the Gospel of John, you can see they're trying to kill him or at least discredit him to get him off of the public scene and out of the public eye. And he is able to thwart and navigate all of their challenges and all the offenses they throw at him. And he always comes out better than what he went into those scenarios. And they end up looking like the bad guys. Well, here's the catch-22 that they're presenting to Jesus. Old Testament says this woman deserves to be stoned. So if Jesus says, no, we're not going to do that, then he is openly disregarding the law of Moses. And he cannot be Israel's great teacher. He cannot be the Messiah. Because if he goes against what Moses said, Moses was one of the prophets ordained by God to write the first 5 books of the Bible is what he wrote. You can't go against Moses and be with God. So they know that if he says, no, you can't stone her to death, we're not going to do that kind of stuff anymore, then they're going to be able to turn to the people and say, and what else of Moses' teachings are we going to disregard? And that there would be a sway away from Jesus. That's what they're hoping for. If he by chance says, hey, that's what's in the Torah, you're right, let's stone her to death. Then he's going to get in trouble politically by the Romans. See, Israel is no longer a sovereign nation. Rome was in charge of Israel. And the thing with Rome is, if you're going to execute somebody, you don't get to make that decision. Israelites, Jews, you don't have the power of life and death. Only we do as Romans. So whenever they would come in and take over, they would say, you've got to follow Roman law, and you've got to worship some of our Roman gods. You want to worship your gods too? That's fine, but these have to remain as staples. So if Jesus condemns her to death and they execute her, the Romans are going to come looking for Jesus because he stood as a judge and elevated himself above the Roman emperor. You can't have someone executed without Roman permission. That's why the Jews, when they wanted to have Jesus crucified, they had to take him to Pilate. If they didn't take him to Pilate, they're putting their heads on the chopping block, so to speak. And they condemn themselves to death if they have Jesus executed without Roman permission. If Jesus has her executed without Roman permission, same thing. He's going to be held accountable. So either he gets discredited among the people because he says, don't stone her, or he gets himself executed by the Romans for breaking their law. And in the minds of the Jewish leaders who have created this whole scenario, it's checkmate. They've got him. There's no way for Jesus to get out of this. Now, part of the problem here is that they said, hey, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Usually there are 2 people that are involved in that act, aren't there? Only half the people are there. Where's the dude at? Well, you can kind of see, without knowing all the details, that they set this up. And the people in the crowd probably were able to figure it out too. They're like, well, where'd the guy go? Well, he was too fast. He just got out of there quick. But we were able to catch her. We're not buying it. It's very clear that they created this scenario where they probably played some guy off to be involved in this activity. They let him go, and they arrest the woman and bring her to Jesus to be condemned for death. And so they're questioning Jesus, and here's what Jesus does. He bent down and he started to write on the ground with his finger. I see him whistling while he's doing it. There's like this big moment that's been created, this big tension that's been unveiled. All the people are waiting and watching, and there Jesus is. Bob Rossing it up. There's a happy tree, yes. And here's some mountains and some clouds. I don't know what he's writing. Some people say he's writing Old Testament passages that would have condemned these guys, or he's writing all of their sins down. I have no idea what he's writing. I think he's writing for the sake of bringing about more tension and more awkwardness and like thickening the air, so to speak. Because what he's about to do is a mic drop. He wants it to appear, I think, he doesn't know what he's going to say. He doesn't know what he's going to do. And the whole time, I mean, he already probably had his prayer time that morning. He knew everything that was going to happen before it happened. And he's like, how long am I going to sit here and draw and keep the tension building? That's where that song was written, by the way. The Andy Griffith theme is when Jesus was drawing. He was whistling. And they keep questioning him, and they start yelling at him, and they're like, we got him. Let's just lay it on thick. Let's get really aggressive with him. And they keep coming at Jesus, and he stands up. Let any of you who's without sin be the first to throw the stone at her. Okay? He goes back to writing on the ground. And they're like, oh no. We had him. We had the catch-22. There was no way out of this. And doggone it, he found a way out. Because here's what he's saying. He's not saying, let anybody who is perfect throw the first stone at her. Let anyone who is sinless. Because this was in the Old Testament. This was something that they did. And you didn't have to be a perfect person to participate in this execution. But this scenario, as it was unfolded, Jesus says, your hands are not clean. And Jesus, they've come to him as if he's the judge. And there's some between the lines things that are going on. You got to kind of read between the lines. Because Jesus is essentially saying, hey, you without sin cast the first stone. And FYI, you stone her to death, you're on trial next. Because I've got some questions like, where's the man in this scenario? How was she caught in the act of adultery before dawn? You guys just happen to be walking by the window? Let's go to where this scene unfolded. Let's do some investigation. Now, wait a minute. This happened in the second story. How did you just happen upon the catcher in the act of adultery? What does that... And then these guys know, now, wait a minute. If we follow through with this, he's going to start investigating. We're going to be on the chopping block. So when they start to very quickly realize, oh no, he got out of this, and now he's put the pressure on us. He's going to put us on trial if we follow through with this. So here's what happens. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time. The older ones first, because they're smarter, and they have less hormones getting in their way of their thinking. They're like, oh, he got us. He got it. Everybody drop. Let's go. And the younger one, like, the 20-something's like, no, I think I was warming up all morning for this. I think we can still get him. I think we should still start. Like, Charlie, come on. Let's go. He's got us. It's checkmate on us. There's nothing we can do. And so they all start to go away. And as it's happening, Jesus is sitting there drawing still. And he can hear thud, 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 just dropping their rocks and walking away, tail between their legs. Older ones first because they know that they got to save face. The younger ones last because they think there's still got to be a way that we can get him. And so after Jesus hears the last rock hit the ground and the last person leave, he finishes what he was doing, what he was doodling on the ground, what he was writing, stands up again. And he asks the woman, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Are all your accusers gone? She says, yep, no one's here, sir. They've all left. Well, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. There's this tension of, that's not good. Nobody's just giving her a pass in terms of, adultery, it's not that big a deal. Nobody would say that. But Jesus is saying, okay, well, legally, according to the Old Testament law, I can't condemn you because all the witnesses are gone. There's no one left to testify. But you've been given a second chance. Go now and leave your life of sin. It's not, we dodged a bullet, go have fun. her, hey, nothing's going to happen to you. You've got a green light to go do just what you were doing. And even worse, she's like, pump the brakes a little bit. You need to leave your life of sin because you've been given a second chance and new life and new hope. And she's able to walk away with her life spared because Jesus was able to navigate that situation. Now, a lot of times when we apply this teaching to our lives, people use it in the context of, now wait a minute, don't hold me accountable, don't judge me, don't say anything to me. Ye who's without sin, cast the first stone. They go King James on you because they say ye, because you heard it when you were a little kid, and you just think, hey, you don't get to say anything to me. You got problems in your life. So let's not throw stones at each other here. Let's not come at each other and you're wrong in this way. No, let's just, if you're without sin, you can cast the first stone. And it's like, I don't want to be held accountable. I don't want to be told when I'm wrong, which, by the way, nobody does. Does anybody like to be told you dropped the ball, you made a mistake, you didn't do as good as you should have done? Nobody. If you did, you'd need counseling. And you probably would go to counseling because they tell you all the things you're doing wrong. No one likes to hear that. It's painful. It leads to growth. But every person who hears that immediately gets defensive, don't they? Well, hey, ye who without sin cast the first stone. Don't judge me. You need to judge yourself. But the reality is, in Scripture, the Apostle Paul does challenge Christians to judge or hold accountable other Christians. Now, there is a principle in place that's basically make sure your own house is in order before you go telling somebody else how to live. You've got to be careful not to just look for opportunities to light people up and tell them all the ways that they're wrong and all the mistakes that they've made because you like making people feel small and inferior when the whole time not really figuring out where you're weak in your life and where you need to clean things up. So make sure that you're kind of personally making sure that things are on the up and up for you and you're doing your best to follow God and you're trying to be clean in all these areas. And whenever you hold someone accountable, it's because you love them and you know what they're doing is going to bring chaos or drama to their lives. I'm going to tell you you're wrong, not because it's fun. I'm going to tell you you're wrong because I love you, because I want to see you do and be better. And I think in all those conversations, it's all generated by like the Holy Spirit leading you to have those conversations. And it's all done in a humble, prayerful way. So, hey, Christians aren't supposed to judge. We actually are within the confines of our church. We are supposed to hold one another accountable in a loving, forgiving way. But I hope you love me too much to allow me to exist and continue on in sin without saying something to me. So that's one scenario we need to address. But when we think about it all and try to figure out the different layers and dynamics that are here, I want to look at the three different groups that are found in this story to kind of really figure out application. You've got the woman, you've got the accusers, and you've got Jesus. And each of them kind of give us a different angle of looking at the scene and situation that's come about. First, let's think about the woman. How ashamed and embarrassed do you think she was when she was drug out in front of those people and thrown before Jesus, and we caught this woman in the act of adultery? She can't deny it. There's no excuse making. She can't explain it away. The accusation that they made about her is accurate. She did exactly what they claim that she did. And if you've ever been yelled at by a coach or gotten onto, like a teacher gets on to you in front of the class, or you get yelled at work, or your parent gets on to you in front of people, don't you feel so small in those moments and so embarrassed, and you wish you could just disappear, and you wish it could all go away? Well, what this woman experienced is those moments like times infinity. And I think she thought she was going to die. I think that she probably believed that she was going to be executed. So she's ashamed, and she's embarrassed. She has, ruined her family name, if you will. There's a good chance that people knew who she was. They knew who her husband was. Like, there are so many layers and dynamics there, and it's impossible to know exactly what she's thinking, but if she's a human being with a pulse, she for sure felt ashamed and embarrassed. And then, as she's waiting, what's going to happen? And Jesus is just sitting there drawing in the dirt, adding more tension to the situation. I could see it almost being unbearable. Like standing before a judge, when they've got on camera, so to speak, you've done all of these things, and it's embarrassing, and you know you're going to go to prison. You're just wondering how long, what, all this stuff. Like, who knows what's flying through her brain. And then Jesus says what he says, and she can hear thud, 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 as these guys are dropping the stones and walking away. And then the last stone gets dropped, and she's kind of looking, and they're all gone. They're nowhere to be found. And Jesus is like, hey, where are they? Where are your accusers? Has anyone stayed? No one, sir. I mean, imagine that. Like, no, they're all gone. What's about to happen next? And Jesus says, I don't condemn you either. Go now. Thank you, sir. And she starts to leave. And leave your life of sin. You've been given a second chance. You've been given new hope. You've been given new life. Don't use this second opportunity. Don't use this new life as an opportunity to just like say, well, I'm invincible. I'm the exception to the rule. I'm never going to get caught again. I'm never going to get in trouble again. That's how sometimes we take second chances. We do something we shouldn't have done. It didn't end as badly as we thought we would, and so we just get worse. Jesus is like, leave your life of sin. Now, as she's leaving, keep in mind, she's got some difficult conversations that she's got to have with her husband, with her family. She's stigmatized by this from that moment moving forward. It's not like there were no consequences for her actions. There were. She was going to have to live with that. But imagine the excitement that she had to feel, the relief that she would have had knowing that she could have been executed for what she did, and Jesus stepped in and he intervened. Now, we don't know what happens in her life moving forward. We can speculate, and we can try to figure out, did she use this as a second opportunity to get better? Or did she kind of laugh by the whole thing and think, I got off scot-free, and then go do worse? We don't know. But let me ask you, what are you going to do, or what are you doing with your second chance at life? At this new life that you've been given? And do you respond with this gratitude and excitement that you need to have? Jesus has stepped in. He has saved us from our sins. Just like the woman, we've been caught red-handed. We've done all kinds of terrible things. We deserved eternal death, eternal separation from God. And Jesus didn't just say, no. He said, I'll take it. I'll take the punishment. I'll go to the cross so that they don't have to suffer the consequences for their sins and for their lives for all eternity. Shouldn't that stir something up within us? I don't know what the woman did when she left, but I know what I want to be about. I know what I want to do. I know how I want to live, and I know how I want all of us to live. That the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, the unconditional grace and love that we've been given, is on the front of our minds, and it causes us to act and think and treat others differently. It causes us to spend our money and our time and use our energy differently because eternity matters. And we've been given a second chance at life. And it isn't just leave your life of sin. That is a part of it. But it's think about all that you can do for the kingdom and how God can use you to bring more people out of their sin. to bring more people into a relationship with Him, to give more people second life and a second chance. And so whenever we think about this forgiveness and grace, think about how you can honor what Jesus did on the cross in gratitude and thankfulness. Because really, at the end of our lives, that's all that will matter anyway. Well, that's what we learn from the woman in this story. We were all her at one time, and we have been forgiven, just as she was. Then I think of the accusers. I think of the men that brought her, the men who kind of created this whole scenario and were involved in this entrapment that certainly paid the guy off so that this would happen, let him go free. They were willing to see this woman executed just to try to knock Jesus off of his pedestal. They were so convinced that they were right and that Jesus was wrong, even though they were unable to disprove him in public debates, even though when he taught, people are like, this guy teaches different than everybody else, and he knows more about the Old Testament law. Of course, it was just the law then. He knows more about the law than anybody. This guy is amazing. Look at his miraculous signs. These leaders didn't know as much. They couldn't out-debate him. They couldn't do any of the miraculous signs, but they were so hard-headed and so stubborn and so prideful and arrogant that they were willing to see this woman executed just to get rid of Jesus. How sick and twisted do you have to be to get to that place to where you're willing just to see collateral damage in the lives of the people around you and see people hurt, maybe even people die for the sake of what it is that you think is right, and not even consider, I might be wrong in this. I wonder if those religious leaders went, if there was just one of them who said, now wait a minute, let's pump the brakes. What if we're wrong? At the end of chapter 7, Nicodemus does that. He's like, now, time out here. Should we, think about this a little bit more? So we want to kill Jesus? We're going to have blood on our hands because we don't think he's the Messiah? Won't it kind of play out to where he loses popularity, his movement loses steam? Do we have to murder him, which is sin, by the way? Do we have to go to that level? What if we're wrong? So he says it at one point, but in this scenario, we don't know how that meeting went. They were just like, hey, we're going to get rid of Jesus, and we don't care who has to suffer or what the consequence. We're just going to get rid of Jesus. That's a really dangerous place to be. And sometimes we can become so religious, so self-righteous, so right, put that in quotes. We think we're so right, everybody else is wrong, you can't convince me otherwise. That is a dangerous place to be. And it usually leads in a destructive place, or to a destructive place. I'm okay with you having convictions. I'm okay with you sticking to your guns. But in the back of your mind, you need to leave open the scenario or the door for, I might be wrong in this. Because you might be. Has anybody ever been wrong before? Once in your life? I was wrong 3 times this morning. I put on mismatched socks. I'm like, what in the world? Who folded these? Oh, I did. That's 2 wrongs right there back to back. So you're going to be wrong. With little things, with big things, and everything in between. And you got to be careful. I'm okay with you in a way being dogmatic in that I have a really strong belief. But be careful what you do with what you know. And be careful just saying, I know I'm right. It's not even my opinion. I know I'm right. This is what I'm doing, and I don't care who I hurt in the process. May I give you an example? You're like, please don't. Please don't give us an example. I hate your examples. I hate your scenario. My wife was like, as I was giving the example, she was going, oh, just don't go there, Doug. Don't go there. Don't go there, Doug. My parents are probably going to do it. No, Doug, don't go there. Come on, Doug, don't go there. Just stop. Do you have to be controversial all the time? Yes. So buckle up. Everybody buckled up? Because this roller coaster is going upside down. I want you falling out now. In our culture right now, there are things that we are talking about, and everybody's right, and everybody's saying something different. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I don't even have to say it, do I? I have very strong opinions on the matter. Very strong opinions. I just know that when your opinions are just as strong as mine, we're probably not going to debate ourselves into seeing things the same way. Because when you believe something and they believe something, really you're just throwing mud at each other and you both come out looking like pigs, okay? And I don't like getting dirty and looking like a pig. I have the strong opinions, and I think that you are entitled to your opinion, and I think you should do what you have, whatever decision you've come to. Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine. You come to that decision prayerfully, according to your own convictions. I'm okay with you defending your stance and your opinion. I'm not saying, shut up and just do what you do you and don't, because, there's a lot going on. You need to be able to share your opinions. But, and here's a big but. You could be wrong. Oh, I ain't wrong, Doug. I ain't wrong. Okay, fair enough. Dr. So-and-so. You could be wrong. But I know I could be wrong. Now, the last time it happened was in 1992, to be fair. And I was, no, never mind. I'm going to stop. That was just a tangent. That wasn't even there. So you could be wrong. I could be wrong. I've got my convictions. I'm holding to them now. And if you want to know, hey, where do you stand? I'll tell you where I stand. But I'm not coming at you with negativity, with bigotry. I'm not going to yell at you. Don't yell at me either. I don't like that. Let's love one another. Because here's the thing. We're a church family. And I could say, stand up, you go to this side of the room if you believe this, and you go to this side of the room if you believe this. Now everybody's going to share their opinion. It would get ugly. Like in 0.2 seconds, it would get ugly, wouldn't it? And it's like, oh goodness, that escalated quickly. Note to self, don't do that anymore. That's a bad ministry idea. I don't want us to be there. And I know that you think, well, the only reason we're not going to be there, or the only way we're not going to, is if these people get on board and they see what the truth is. Have your opinions, have your convictions, but do not be like the Pharisees who said, we've got to do this, and we are so convinced that this is right, we don't care what happens to anybody else in our relationships, because for me, here's my big end goal. This is going to sound terrible, but it's the truth. So give me an umbrella of grace. If you get the vaccine, you're going to eventually die, and you're going to stand before Jesus. If you don't get the vaccine, you're going to eventually die, and you're going to stand before Jesus. We're all going to die. My big concern is what happens to that person after their heart stops beating. I really want everybody in my life, in my path to meet Jesus. I want to lead the type of life that brings people to Jesus. I've got my convictions. I'm very opinionated. I want to be careful about how I share those, because my end game is not everybody wears a mask and is vaccinated, or nobody wears a mask, nobody's vaccinated. My goal is everybody meets Jesus. I'm playing the long game. And there's going to be some, I think for the rest of my life, this is what I believe. Take it for what it's worth. I think it's always going to be something for the rest of my life that looks like this and causes division. This is going to happen over and over and over. It's just not going to stop. And whether that's the government doing it or it just happened naturally, it ain't going to stop. I'm more concerned with you meeting Jesus than with your personal convictions or medical decisions. And I want you to be more concerned with that as well. Now, it is true, if somebody says, are you getting the vaccine? And you say no, they're going to jump down your throat. Or, did you get the vaccine? And you say yes, and they're going to jump down your throat. That's possible. And in that scenario, you can't do anything about that. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everybody. But sometimes somebody comes looking for a fight. I get it. But don't give them a fight. Share what you are convicted of. Share your opinions. And then when they jump down your throat, just be like, hey, I've already had breakfast today. I'm out of this conversation. I don't need this. And just walk away. Because you know that when someone gets combative, you're not going to have a Jesus mic drop moment like we see here. It's just going to get ugly. All right, everybody take a deep breath. All right, we're done. We're moving on. Be humble, gracious, and loving as often as you can, okay? And then finally, we think about Jesus and how he was able to handle this situation. But the thing I think about, as he's walking through this, as this scenario's unfolding, he knows, I'm going to die for that sin. And these guys are wrong. And I'm going to go to the cross. I'm going to die for their sins. And I can look around the people. I see all kinds of sins. I'm going to go die for all of them. Jesus came to die for all sins. So it's not like he's given a pass and saying, there are no longer any consequences for sins. He says, I'm going to pay the consequences for all of these sins. Sins of the past, sins that are happening right now, sins that will happen 2,000 years later in some place called America. Jesus knew it all. He knew all the stuff that was going to happen. And he said, I'm going to come, I'm going to die for these sins. And so for Jesus, we think about, holding people accountable and judgment and all that. Jesus is like, there will be judgment. Either you're going to face the judgment or I'm going to face it for you. And he came and died so that we might be forgiven of our sins. Let's not take that for granted. Let's not just move on from that. Let's not just hear, okay, yeah, you talk about the sacrifice of Christ. You do it every week. We take communion every week. It's like, and you just move on. We can't do it. It's too big, it's too monumental, and there's too much at stake for everybody else. So as we leave here today, let's be thankful for what Jesus did for us when he died on the cross for our sins, and let's take this new life that's been given and use it to be light in this dark world.